In 1771, the Encyclopaedia Britannica called Grand Tartary the largest country on Earth. By 1900, nearly every map and textbook had erased it, without a single formal decree or explanation. How does the world's greatest empire vanish from official history overnight, leaving only anomalies in maps and buried traces beneath modern cities? This story begins with a contradiction buried in plain sight. The first edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica, published in 1771, lists Tartary as the largest country in the world. The entry appears alongside China, France, and the Ottoman Empire. Yet Tartary receives a scale and scope unmatched by any other. The text describes it as a vast country in the northern parts of Asia, bounded by Siberia on the north and west, and by the Pacific Ocean on the east. It subdivides into Great Tartary, Chinese Tartary, Independent Tartary, and Lesser Tartary. No qualifiers, no suggestion of myth. Just a matter-of-fact statement, printed in the reference book trusted by the English-speaking world. The facsimile page stands as a primary source, its typeface and paper quality unchanged since the reign of George III. The wording is clear. Tartary, the largest country in the world, is situated in the northern parts of Asia. The entry does not hedge or speculate. It simply presents Tartary as a geopolitical fact, its borders stretching across the map from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific. Cartographic archivists have spent decades cataloguing these early references. They note that the 1771 edition of the Encyclopaedia Britannica was compiled from the best available maps and travel reports of its time, drawing on the work of Delisle, Dunville, and other leading geographers. The encyclopedia's authority rested on the consensus of the era's most respected mapmakers. In the context of the 18th century, to appear in Britannica was to be acknowledged by the English-speaking world as real, relevant, and significant. Yet the magnitude of Tartary's presence in this edition is not just an artifact of cartographic ignorance. The entry lists sub-regions, describes the peoples and customs, and refers to its vastness as an established fact. No other region outside Europe receives such treatment. The implication is unmistakable. In 1771, Tartary was not a rumor or a blank space. It was the world's largest nation, and its existence was accepted without question by the very authorities who defined the boundaries of knowledge for an entire generation. This single page is more than a historical curiosity. It is a contradiction in plain sight, a record that demands explanation. If Tartary was once the largest country on Earth, why does it not appear in the records, maps, or textbooks of the modern era? The answer is not found in footnotes or editorial debates, but in the stark difference between what was once accepted as fact and what later generations were taught to forget. In the decades after the 1771 Encyclopaedia Britannica declared Tartary the world's largest country, a quiet transformation swept through the atlases and reference books of Europe. By the mid-19th century, the name Tartary, once printed in bold across the heart of Asia, began to recede from newly published maps. The change was not gradual, and it did not unfold over centuries. Instead, the period from 1850 to 1900 saw an almost uniform disappearance, as if the label had been systematically erased from the cartographic record. A side-by-side review of major atlases reveals the pattern. On maps from the early 1800s, Tartary still sprawls across northern Asia, subdivided into Great Tartary, Chinese Tartary, and Independent Tartary. But by 1885, the Library of Congress Central Asia map shows no trace of the term. In its place are the precise boundaries and names of the Russian Empire, Mongolia, Turkestan, and Manchuria. The transformation is complete. A territory that once spanned 2 continents is now parceled out under new nomenclature. This was not the result of a single directive. Researchers have combed through the minutes of the 1875 International Geographical Congress, searching for any resolution that might explain the sudden vanishing act. No such decree has surfaced. There is no record of a formal abolition, no public debate, no treaty or law that marks the passing of Tartary from the world's maps. The disappearance occurs almost in silence, spread across publishers in London, Paris, Berlin, and St. Petersburg. The uniformity is striking. By the 1880s, encyclopedias and schoolbooks refer to Tartary only in the past tense, if at all, describing it as an outdated European label for lands now properly divided among Russia, China, and Central Asian Khanates. The revision is so thorough that even the word itself becomes a historical footnote. This tight window is a matter of a few decades, and it raises uncomfortable questions. How could such a sweeping change unfold without a traceable order? Why do the archives of the era lack any explanation for the coordinated shift? The evidence points not to a slow evolution of knowledge, but to a moment when the map itself was rewritten. The paper trail grows cold just as the world enters the era of modern borders and scientific geography. What remains is a pattern of erasure that demands a closer look at the physical world, to see whether the disappearance from the page was matched by changes on the ground. The Alexander Column towers over Palace Square in St. Petersburg, a monolith of red granite standing more than 25 meters high. The shaft alone weighs close to 600 tons. Russian imperial records date its erection to 1834, under the direction of Auguste de Montferrand. According to engineering notes from the period, the column was quarried on an island in the Gulf of Finland, then transported by barge and sled across more than 100 kilometers. The official account describes a feat of logistics, with hundreds of men, teams of horses, and a scaffold system powered by block and tackle rigs. Calculations from structural engineers show that with a mechanical advantage of 6 to 8 to 1, each turn of the capstan delivered only a fraction of the force needed to lift the column upright. Even at maximum efficiency, the operation required thousands of coordinated movements, with every rope and pulley carrying the risk of catastrophic failure. The margin for error was razor thin. Beyond the spectacle of the lift, the economics of the finished structure raise a different kind of question. The column interior is a hollow tube, an air shaft that, if heated to a comfortable temperature in the Russian winter, would demand an immense and continuous supply of fuel. The energy cost to keep such a volume warm, with ceilings reaching nearly 30 feet overhead, would have been staggering for any 19th century city. Heating calculations reveal that the cubic meters of air inside would require orders of magnitude more wood or coal than a typical building of the era. Yet the design was not unique. Across the imperial capitals of Europe and North America, the same grand proportions appear again and again. Vast halls, towering columns, and cavernous interiors were built decades before the arrival of modern heating systems or industrial cranes. Numbers do not add up easily. The engineering math behind the Alexander Column is possible, but it pushes the limits of what can be achieved with hand labor and simple machines. The economics of heating such spaces challenge the logic of societies supposedly living on the margins of pre-industrial technology. When the official timeline is measured against the physical realities, tonnage, manpower, fuel, and risk, the story begins to strain. The forensic audit does not claim impossibility, but it leaves a question. Were these monuments truly the product of their time? Or is there a missing chapter in the ledger of how such structures came to stand? City ledgers from the late 19th century tell a story in numbers and elevations. In Seattle, the Denny Regrade project, authorized by ordinance in 1897, called for up to 30 feet of earth to be sluiced away from the city's hills. Cross-sections from the city engineer's office show the original street grades alongside the new higher lines. The difference is not theoretical. On First Avenue, entire blocks rose by more than 2 stories. The ledger clerk's handwriting in the Improvement District book records each parcel's assessment, the volume of soil moved, and the final grade. The city paid 27 cents per cubic yard to the Rainier Development Corporation, a figure that multiplies quickly when the contract called for hundreds of thousands of cubic yards. Sanborn fire insurance maps from 1889 and 1905, laid side by side, reveal the real-time transformation. Buildings that once opened directly onto the street now show basement entries below a new sidewalk. In Pioneer Square, the city issued permits for sidewalk vaults, underground spaces lit by glass prisms set into the pavement above. These prism lights, patented in the 1890s, brought daylight into what had become subgrade floors. Municipal records detail the installation: iron frames, cut glass prisms, and vaults spanning the length of the block. The logic was simple. When the street rises but the building stays, the old first floor becomes a basement. San Francisco followed a similar script. After the gold rush, the city filled in its tidal flats and raised waterfront streets, sometimes by more than 10 feet. City Council minutes from the 1860s specify the target elevations at each intersection. The infill buried original doorways and windows, leaving only the upper stories visible from the new street. Portland's council journals echo the same process: waterfront improvements, dredged fill, and grade changes that turned riverside basements into sidewalk-level storefronts. Permits for sidewalk prism lights appear in city engineering files, matching the timeline of street elevation projects. The word to watch here is infill. Yet, for every city with a documented regrade, there are others where the paper trail runs thin. Ledger books and engineering profiles explain the buried windows in Seattle, San Francisco, and Portland, but the same architectural patterns appear in cities without known grade-raising projects. The question lingers: how much of the world's buried architecture is the result of planned municipal work, and how much remains unexplained? The ledgers answer part of the mystery, but not all. 600 acres of swamp and scrub transformed into a city of marble in under 2 years. That is the official account of the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. The site plan, signed off in 1891, called for a power grid, a network of artificial lagoons, and a skyline of domes and colonnades that rivaled the capitals of Europe. Procurement ledgers from the Fair's Works Department list orders for tens of thousands of electric bulbs, hundreds of miles of wiring, and enough lumber to build a small town. The manufacturers and liberal arts building alone covered more than 30 acres under one roof, supported by iron trusses that span nearly 400 feet. Payroll records, where they survive, show a workforce peaking at 20,000 laborers and craftsmen. yet the timeline from groundbreaking to opening day was less than 24 months. A memo from the fair's procurement officer dated March 1892 notes the urgent need to source materials for structures that on paper were never meant to last. The specification for staff, a plaster and fibre mix designed to mimic stone, appears repeatedly in the contracts. But the foundations and substructures beneath the White City tell a different story. Piles driven deep, reinforced platforms, and utility corridors built to industrial standards. When the fair closed, demolition orders moved nearly as fast as construction. By 1895, almost everything was gone, burned, dismantled, or left to rot. The official narrative claims the city was always temporary, yet the procurement documents and demolition invoices are conspicuously incomplete. The surviving ledgers jump from material orders to vacant lots, with little trace of the labor, the salvage, or the fate of the infrastructure that powered the world's most advanced city for a single summer. The silence in the paper trail is as stark as the White City's sudden disappearance from the landscape. In 1942, city governments across the United States issued circulars asking residents and building owners to surrender decorative copper for the war effort. Municipal scrap committees listed rooftop ornaments, spires, and weather vanes among items eligible for collection. The War Production Board, created by executive order in January, set quotas for non-ferrous metals and directed local authorities to canvass neighborhoods for non-essential copper and brass. Churches and civic buildings, once capped with elaborate finials and lightning rods, found their rooftops stripped bare. Parish bulletins in New York and Chicago documented the removal of bells, railings, and cupolas, and city press releases urged citizens to view the sacrifice as a patriotic duty. The official line framed these drives as a matter of necessity, but the scale of removal went beyond railings and fences. Records from the Office of War Information describe entire wards competing to deliver tons of architectural metal, with block captains reporting weekly tallies. In some districts, city engineers issued permits for the dismantling of copper cornices and ironwork that had crowned public buildings since the previous century. Post-campaign audits, where they exist, count the tonnage but rarely specify what structures were lost. Technical appraisals, if they were made at all, are missing from the surviving files. Electrical historians point to early lightning rod patents, some dating to the late 18th century, that describe rooftop conductors capable of channeling atmospheric electricity. One patent from 1803 details a system for collecting and grounding electrical charge, but by the 1940s, such rooftop arrays were classified as obsolete. The wartime scrap campaigns provided a practical mechanism for removing these components, whether their purpose was safety or something more. What remains is a silence in the technical record, and a skyline where the metalwork of a previous age has vanished without inventory or explanation. At the edge of the North Sea, the star-shaped bastions of Fort Bourtange cut precise, geometric angles into the Dutch landscape. Each point and curtain wall aligns with geometric regularity, forming patterns that repeat from Europe to Asia, Africa, and the Americas. Survey data from the 19th century records the angles of these bastions as nearly identical, typically 60 or 120 degrees, regardless of continent or local terrain. The same ratio of moat width to wall height appears in fort after fort, as if built to a master plan. These structures often feature more than military defenses. Hydraulic channels snake through the ramparts, feeding moats and underground cisterns, and sometimes extending far beyond the needs of a siege. In Fort Monroe, Virginia, engineers mapped a network of sluices and tunnels capable of draining or flooding entire sections at will. Acoustics inside the Star Force defy expectation. A whispered word at one bastion can be heard at another, hundreds of feet away, thanks to the precise geometry of the walls. Fortologist Dr. Lucas Van Ryn spent decades surveying European and Asian star forts and wrote that these are not merely fortifications. They are machines for managing water and sound, and perhaps even energy. On a world map, the distribution is unmistakable. Star forts cluster along rivers, coastlines, and trade routes, forming a global grid that transcends empires and centuries. Who designed this planetary infrastructure, and for what purpose? In the years following 1854, a new kind of migration began crisscrossing the United States. Trains packed with children, some orphaned, others simply unclaimed, departed the crowded streets of New York and Boston and headed toward the open fields of the Midwest. Placement lists from the Children's Aid Society show more than 200,000 children relocated over the next 7 decades. Names were changed as a matter of course, and a child arriving in Iowa might shed not just a surname, but any trace of former identity. A social historian notes that the records are incomplete, the follow-up sporadic, and many children simply disappear into the census, absorbed under new families and new names. The scale of this movement is staggering. In some counties, census tallies of child laborers spike in the years after a train arrived, yet parental data is missing or contradictory. At the same time, state legislatures began to centralize control over what was taught in schools. By the late 19th century, textbook boards in states like Massachusetts and Illinois dictated approved narratives and new curriculum laws, standardized lessons statewide. The official story was now set by committee, not by local memory. Within a single generation, the living record of who built the cities and what had come before could be replaced, sometimes with little more than a name in a ledger or a line in a lesson plan. Today, official histories still sidestep the missing ledgers, the buried facades, and the silent star forts. As new anomalies surface and digital archives expand, the foundations of our accepted past grow less certain. The story is not just about what was erased, it is about who controls the eraser. Every unanswered question is a reminder. Our present is built on the ruins of what we are told to forget. Join the conversation below.